I'm Tom.
And we are VIMTV Velocities in Music, the best kept secret in music reviews. There's a band from North Carolina called Superchunk. They have actually opened for Radiohead before, believe it or not. Yeah,
that's an odd pairing.
It is. Well, not really back in the '90s. Like it wasn't.
That's true.
That wasn't that.
You take '90s Radiohead and '90s Superchunk. There's a little bit of gray.
Yeah, absolutely.
There.
So obviously, this band came out in 1990. They've put out a ton of albums. I would classify this in kind of like the alternative, almost grunge, not like it kind of grunge lights. It's about as grunge as Radiohead ever got.
it's indie rock. But it's got kind of more of like a pop punk edge to it. Totally. Like, they obviously laid the ground for a lot of, like, the post-hardcore scene. Yeah. A lot of the indie rock of the late 90s and early 2000s, that sort of thing. Their 10th studio album was released earlier this year. It is entitled I Hate Music. And cheeky album title.
This actually came out in August, August 20th. And we skipped over it at the time. There's a lot of stuff coming out back then. But as we're doing our due diligence, combing through the list of albums, a huge list of albums that came out for 2013, Tom and I identified I Hate Music as an album that we wanted to make sure that we covered in our collection of 2013 album reviews. So, without further ado, Superchunk's I Hate Music. This album is a Superchunk album. And as many reviewers, now since we've had a few months, many reviewers have pointed out, it sounds like a Superchunk album. Superchunk's sound is generally that of just what I would call fun rock and roll. Yeah. It's like, it almost has like an 80s hair metal-esque-ness to it, with just a bit more like alternative level energy and like guitar grit. One of the things I really like about this album is the guitar riffs. Throughout this album, there's a lot of really just catchy guitar riffs. The vocalist has a very shrill voice. It's high, but it also has a lot of melody to it. Yeah, and that's where I think this crosses over from just being like your pavement-style indie rock to being more of kind of a pop or a punk format, is that it very much focuses on hooks, both in the vocals and in the guitar. And that doesn't stop it from having a very endearing and authentic indie sound, but it's just, it's a little bit more, you know, if you look at it like a spectrum, you know, a little bit more somewhere in the middle. So, you know, this album in particular, it took me a little while to really get and to really grow on me, just because I felt like it was a little more even than the Superchunk stuff I've heard in the past, in terms of just, you know, consistency in the sound. It doesn't really explode ever. It's well, I mean, the whole, it's a freaking rock album, but I mean, it never goes to 10, you know, and it's never super aggressive. It's just fun, and it's fun to listen to. And you kind of hit the nail on the head there. This is more of that compilation-esque, typical, actually back in the 90s, and you know, when these albums were coming out of this genre, you know, it wasn't about making an album, making this conceptual listen. It was about just making good songs and having a collection of good songs on a compilation CD of what is essentially what it was. But when you put a whole bunch of really good songs together on call it an album, it kind of sounds like an album, as long as the sound is relatively similar throughout the whole album. Like, I would consider, you know, we keep doing this comparison, Radiohead's The Bends. It's more of a compilation feel than an album feel. Still a fantastic album. Now, Superchunk on I Hate Music are definitely doing just that. These are individual tracks. Any of these songs you could take out and make a single, I would say. Not in a single like pop single, but a rock single. A lot of these, they're just very independent-based tracks. Yeah, they are. And so when you put them all together in a format like that, it really comes down to the quality of each track. Each track holds weight towards the album's overall appeal, and it's about when you add those individual components up, what is the sum? And I think that this one is a little bit inconsistent in quality. It totally is. I think that the highlights are very good and very memorable. We both picked like Void and FOH. Good, memorable tracks with a little bit more to offer in terms of just, I don't know, to me I listen for things like how interesting the chord progression is, how well it works with the melody, and things like that determine whether a track sticks with me. I really like intensity and song structure. Yeah, and there are several songs on here that don't really, I mean, they don't really excel in any of those areas. They're just kind of there. And particularly in the middle to kind of middle back half, songs like
Trees of Barcelona, Breaking Down, Out of the Sun. I think that those, you know, none of them are bad if you just heard them on their own, but it's like when you're hearing the same idea being accomplished better in other tracks, then what are those weaker tracks really contributing to the album?
Yeah,
and I think that's just that's basically the definition of what I would call filler.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because this album is actually getting a lot of acclaim.
Right.
It's got, what, like an 80-something on Metacritic. It's gotten mostly positive reviews, and to me, I think that's a little unwarranted.
Now, if this were like another band coming out with I Hate the album I Hate Music and the music we hear on this album today, I don't think this would be getting as much acclaim.
I don't think so either.
Back in 1990, if this album were to come out under a band of a different name, I think that band would get a lot of press.
Yeah.
They really haven't changed a lot of their sound. Now, the problem with that is that it's almost self-diluting at a time.
Yeah.
These are established ideas. These are, I don't like using the term unoriginal in this sense, just because these guys helped create this sound.
Yeah,
They're part of the foundation of what this sound is. So, you know, it kind of behooves them to make sounds like that, to make a sound, an album that sounds like this. And that's totally cool. I get it. It's just you have to think about the listening experience. These like, we've been hearing this for decades, and if a band continues to just do the same sound over and over again, people lose interest after a while. Now, there's always Die Hard, so if you're at Superchunk Die Hard, absolutely, you're probably gonna love I Hate Music. For those of us, though, who are looking for music that pushes the limits of what we know to be music, and really, like, so rock, how can you add value and change the rock genre? That's what I'm looking for. I'm looking to push the envelope a little bit, and this album just simply doesn't do that. Now, there's several tracks on here that I absolutely love. Track 1, Overflows, track 3, Void, track 10, FOH. Really, the first half of this album I thought was pretty good, and then it just, as Tom said, got a little bland, repetitive, not enough new ideas. Even for the album, on this album, not enough new ideas presented just on the album itself, let alone the body of work that's come out in this genre. So I think that does kind of plague the listening experience just a tad.
I agree.
So, pretty decent album. Other than that, I would say I'm going to give this a 69.
I'm going 69 as well.
Okay, 69. On the cusp of being what we would consider a solid album. Just a couple of issues that we would have preferred were straightened out for us to give this a higher score. Now, you may have absolutely loved I Hate Music, and you may be a huge Superchunk fan, and maybe we're just off our rockers. If that is what you believe, preach on, brother. Come tell us about it at www.velocitiesandmusic.com or youtube.com/velocitiesandmusic. Tell us what you liked, what you didn't like, and where you'd like to see Superchunk go from here. Now, also, please follow us on Twitter, like us on Facebook, and let us know what else you would like to see us review on this channel. I'm Jake.
I'm Tom.
And we are VIMTV, moving music critique forward.
How's everything at the front of the house? How's everything at the front of the house? I'm down, but you're